Let's talk now about poverty. The Trump administration, it's been reported this week, wants to mess with how inflation is calculated to modify where the line is for qualifying as being below the federal definition of the poverty line. And the effect of that, we're not gonna get into the math necessarily, but the effect is that literally millions of Americans could be kicked off of programs that are dependent on that line, including access to healthcare services, food assistance programs, and more. Jordan, I was just curious about your response about the way that they're gonna use math to negatively impact the lives of millions of Americans.
So this has been a long-term Republican proposal, right? So the shift is they want to move from the standard consumer price index, which is a measure of like 80,000 goods and the prices of them, to this chained CPI, which relies on a few, which many people on the left say are faulty assumptions, that people will choose different products that are lower in cost. And that's how they measure inflation. The chain CPI, which the Republicans want to move to, increases at a slower rate, which using that to describe or measure poverty would then, like as you say, kick millions of people off of social welfare programs. What this doesn't take into account is the disastrous effects of capitalism over the past century, how people have been subject to food deserts, lower wages, stagnant wages, working multiple jobs, burdened with debt, all of these other things that aren't included in this analysis. So by reducing this inflation rate and kicking people off these projects, you're only going to make it harder. And this is tantamount to Trump and his administration sweeping these issues under the rug. They don't want, it's an eyesore for him and the country. They don't want to deal with it. So they just turn a blind eye to it and just pretend they don't exist.
And what's amazing to me about this is right now we're having this national conversation about how horribly these undocumented migrant children are being treated. And I think it's very easy for especially a lot of conservative Americans to think, well, they're not us, they're not citizens, this doesn't affect me. But when we're talking about these sorts of programs, I think that they have been trained in conservative America for decades to believe that these are all probably, they're thinking racial minorities that are being affected by this, probably just Democrats, but we know by the numbers that that isn't true, that when you kick these millions of people off, a lot of them are going to be big Trump fans. There's gonna be a lot of people who suddenly don't have the food stamps they need to survive on, who are wearing MAGA caps. And so it seems weird that they would probably cheer or at worst probably turn a blind eye to programs that are once again going to be negatively impacting them in an economic sense.
Yeah, it's a strange calculus. It's not one that I think that's not the conclusion if I was on their side that I would reach. But I think it's just a general disdain for people who are struggling. They fail to recognize the privilege that have got them there. I mean, Trump seems to have convinced himself that he's completely self-made despite receiving a massive multi-million-dollar loan from his dad. All of these people who are in these key decision-making positions are completely insulated from the consequences of these decisions. They're far removed from the problem itself. They don't know anyone or really seem to care about anyone in these positions. So what's it to them, right? Yeah. So we need to speak up. We need to push back against this. This can't continue because this is just going to result in more suffering. And for every 1% or so, the unemployment rate goes up. Tens of thousands of people die. A similar analysis could be used to how many people who lose access to Medicaid, how many people lose access to supplemental nutrition assistance programs. This is going to result in suffering and death.
And the consequences are very real, and unfortunately, they're somewhat hidden by the fact that we're just changing how we calculate poverty, that's all. Here on the Damage Report, we talk a lot about the big banks and their ways of getting rich off the poor. They saturate the market, but there are other options. And I've got info on a socially and environmentally responsible financial institution that has no ATM fees, gives you cash back on every purchase. They even commit 10% of their earnings to charity. It's called Aspiration, and if you go to aspiration.com/TYT to sign up, you'll get these perks, and that's more money to spend or to save or to spend. Just treat yourself.